Welcome everyone to another edition of Play It Through, and on this edition it's Ys 4, Mask of the Sun, brought to us by Tonkin House. Ys 4, one of the most interesting games in the Ys series, being that it was actually made for two separate systems by two completely different teams, Tonkin House for the Super Famicom version, and then you also had Hudson Soft for the Turbografx CD version of the game. While the games actually share the same basic storyline, characters, and even music, the gameplay ends up being different as far as the design of the game overall, and in the end, it ended up being the Turbografx version, which many people consider the better game. However, Falcom decided that the Super Famicom version, Mask of the Sun, would be the canon storyline for Ys 4. Well, that was until 2012. Falcom decided to finally make their own Ys 4 game, an Ys Foliage Ocean in Celceta. However, even with all of that, Ys 4 is definitely still worth playing through if you're a fan of the Ys series. So here we go with Ys 4 Mask of the Sun for the Super Famicom. Like other games in the Ys series that did not receive North American releases, I'll be playing a fan-translated version of the game. After the introduction to the game, we get to the main menu, and here we can actually start a new game, of course continue one of our previous saves, or go to the options menu. Here I'm going to speed the text up, not all the way, but when I actually start up the game, I'll definitely speed it up all the way, because even at pretty fast, it still doesn't move quite as fast as I would like it to. After the cutscene, you will get brief control of Adol, the main character of the game. Here I switch over the text all the way to the fastest and then move up into the upper right corner. We now begin our actual trip to Salceda. Once you're ready and done your basic preparations, which we don't have anything here to do in the first town, just go up and say yes, you're ready to go. Once you get control of Adol once again, exit the building that you were in, and then actually start walking along the path. Walk immediately straight up to the center and go towards the gate. You'll be stopped by the 2 guards and end up getting thrown in jail at the very beginning of the game. Once you gain control, go through the opening that's now opened up, and then up the stairs, and then go down a little bit for more guards. After that cutscene is over and the storyline has kind of really been set nicely for us, it's time to actually begin the game itself. After exiting, you can now actually freely go back into that castle area, or the fort, where we're being held prisoner. Once inside, head off to the right and go up the stairs. Then, go up the stairs that's in between the two guards. This will lead you to a room that has 3 treasure chests in it. Here we end up getting 500 gold, which we desperately need some money here. We also get a road of medicine, which actually replenish our magic, as well as we get herbs, which replenish our health. Once you have all 3 of the items, head back down the staircase we came from. Head back down the stairs you came up and then actually exit out of the fort altogether. Once back into the main town itself, head off to the left and go to the shops. Stop in the first shop, the armor shop, and be sure to pick up both a shield and armor. Of course, the leather versions of both, because we don't have enough money to buy the other versions yet. Once you bought both of them, then go next door and go to the sword shop, and be sure to pick up your first sword. With all those items now in your inventory, you can exit to the left in between the 2 guards. This will take you to the first actual real map of the game. And be sure to immediately equip your armor and sword, or else you may be in some trouble here. We're also introduced to the first enemies of the game. The first ones being the slime enemies, which of course are going to be really easy to take care of. If you played Ys 4 Dawn of Ys, the PC Engine Super CD version of the game first, you'll see that the combat overall isn't as good as that version of the game. You don't have as free-flowing movement, and you have to be a lot more precise with your attacks, pretty much landing directly on the enemy in order to actually do any damage to them. Just like all Ys games though, I always find the best strategy is to just be slightly off from directly center, just be a little bit above or below that mark, and then walking into them. Of course, meeting an enemy head-on will most likely end up causing you to take a lot of damage and lead to a pretty much inevitable death. One thing though about Mask of the Sun is that the damage overall that you take doesn't seem to be as bad or as harsh as other Ys games. So that's one thing that really helps you out, especially considering the hit detection sometimes can be a little bit wonky at times. And just like previous games, there's going to be a lot of grinding here in Ys, so we're going to spend the first little bit of the game grinding against the first simple slimes, building up some experience as well as some money. Also, like my previous videos for the Ys series, I will cut out my grinding. So the first area, I grind up to level 6. Once I've gotten to level 6, I head back into town. Then, I stop by the sword shop and buy the secondary sword that we can now afford since we were able to get a bunch of gold. Then go next door and buy yourself the second set of armor as well, the chainmail, as well as the middle shield. Be sure to equip your items and then stand still in town, especially if you have a lot of damage done to you, and replenish all your health meter. Then, go back to the left past the guards and go back up to the mountain where we actually were. Now it's time to actually advance up the mountain and head to the next area. Make your way up the mountain, watching out for the fast bug-moving enemies. I'm sure if you already grinded up to level 6, you fought quite a few of these guys, because they definitely give more experience, of course, than the slimes. Anytime you see a large group of enemies, though, it's always good to just stop and actually take them all out instead of running past them, because you can always use that little bit of extra experience to cut down on a tiny bit of your grinding later on in the game. When you make it to the top, head up the giant staircase. When you make it to the very top, you'll see this pedestal, and this pedestal will definitely come in handy later on in the game. So just do a little quick conversation by walking up to it, because I think that ends up activating something that we need later on, basically a warp point. Then when you come down the other side of the mountain, you're introduced to new enemies. These ogre-like enemies are definitely slower than the bugs, but they pack a little bit more of a punch. So you may want to spend some time with these guys, but for the most part, you should be high enough level already from the other grinding that you don't have to really worry about these guys. In the next area, walk up to the portrait and start another cutscene. After the scene where we're introduced to Karna for the first time, who is easily one of my favorite characters in the whole game, we then go over to the left side and enter into the forest area. This area has brand new enemies to tangle with, as you have fast moving bugs as well as scorpions. The other thing about this area is that it's a big tree village, and there's tons of ladders with all of these little paths to take. So finding the right path sometimes can be a little bit tricky, but it's definitely not too confusing as you're making your way all the way through it. The worst thing though is some of the platforms you are on are pretty small, so fighting an enemy on a small platform in this game can cause you to take some unnecessary damage, so be careful. On the second screen, just be careful of your health while taking out the enemies and work your way along the ladders to the left side of the screen. We're now actually in the village. Just so you know, sometimes this game will end up glitching on us and we'll have to save and reload in order to get the border to be fixed. Trust me, you're not going to miss anything on the few times I may have to do that. Anyway, once you get control of Adol once again, head down the ladder on the left side. You can then go over to the right and continue working your way down the village. You'll have to move around a weird path, but eventually you'll be able to get over to the left side of the screen. Once you do so, you'll be on another area filled with enemies. These enemies are tougher than the ones on the first set of the forest area. Since we did that grinding earlier, we shouldn't have too much trouble with these enemies, but if you want to spend some time, you can spend up and level a tiny bit during this segment, but definitely will have easier leveling coming up. Like I said, the worst part though is easily because some of the enemies are on small platforms that can definitely get in your way easily. This open bridge area is the best area if you're looking to do some quick training, because you can move back and forth pretty quickly to get the enemies to keep respawning and taking them out over and over again. Past that area, we'll now be onto the ground itself in this weird cave-like area. Watch out for the new enemy as well as the enemies we'll be battling on the side of the tree. Walk over to the right, and you'll have to wait for the right moment, but you'll be able to actually go into this weird rotating sand pit. Jump into one, and then immediately jump into one next to it. When you make it out here, you can go down here and take out a quick skeleton enemy, but then you'll also want to go right to the next sand pit that we saw on the left side. Sometimes it can be a little bit tricky just trying to enter those things. Once you come out, walk over to the left, entering another one, and then do the same in the next area. Eventually, you'll come out in an area after going through several of these sand pit areas that you'll be able to actually continue on. Here we'll now be heading north along the path, working our way to the next exit. Once you make it through this entrance, you'll be in the second half of the area. Be sure not to walk into this door until you're ready to actually fight the boss. Be sure to save beforehand if you need to. Once you go inside though, it's time for the first boss fight of the game. This Minotaur enemy ends up being rather easy. Watch out for his big charge move that he does, and walk into his leg in order to actually do damage. Eventually he'll stop and end up throwing out his boomerang-like weaponry. Just keep going in a circle around the room, watching out for his fire. Keep walking through his legs in order to keep doing damage. Unless you did a ton of extra leveling up to this point, it will take some time to actually lower his health all the way, but doing a nice circular square pattern around the room, you shouldn't have too much trouble being able to drain his health while also dodging most of his attacks. Eventually though, you can start walking right in front of him back and forth real quick if you time it correctly, and you'll be able to keep doing extra damage as well, and then back away from him. Once you're able to take care of the boss, he'll disappear, as well as you'll get full health back, as well as some experience. After getting the Eye of the Sun item, we'll now be in another area. Start working your way up the mountain. Once you make it to the top of the mountain though, you'll be in a new village. Start off by going through the center of town and then take the left path into this house. Start talking to this girl and she'll mention the bottle. After the conversation with her, you'll leave her house, go back to the center of town and go over to the right side and enter the sword shop. You should have enough money at this point in order to actually purchase your next weapon, the Talwar. With the sword in hand, now move yourself back to the center and go straight up to this dog standing in the middle area. Once the dog moves out of your way, you'll now be in another big forest area, and a few steps in it will start to rain. These tree enemies will take a decent amount of damage from you before you're actually able to take them out, but they give some great experience already early on in this game. Right here is one of my best places to train early on, so I recommend grinding again. Of course, you want to also be more intelligent than I was here, and be sure to equip the sword right away. Move up and down here, taking out the tree enemies as well as the Venus flytrap enemies at the top. Don't worry about the lightning as it won't damage you. Once you leveled up a couple of times, head back into town. Once back in the actual main town itself, you'll want to make sure that you heal up, but also go to the armor shop. By doing that little bit of grinding, you should have enough money now and actually order the purchase of the next armor, the scale armor. And then you'll also be able to purchase the next shield, which is the kite shield. These little upgrades definitely come in handy, so it's worth grinding out the bit of money you'll have to do so in order to actually buy them. Be sure to, of course, equip them, and then head back into that rainy forest that we just were in training. Once you have full health and the new equipment, it's time to enter back into the forest area and continue along to the actual storyline of the game. Be careful in this area with those enemies. The tree enemies and the snake enemies aren't too bad, but the Venus flytrap enemies can shoot out their projectile that can end up following you a little bit and end up chasing you, so you have to be careful and run away from that. Head off into the left side here and you go through this little path of trees, eventually getting a cutscene with lightning that ends up striking all 4 of the trees circling around you. The lightning will then hit you and you end up blasting off into a whole new area. You end up in the Sacred Stormveil Castle. Follow the path for a pretty important cutscene introducing more characters. You do get brief control of your character, but just walking to one of the enemies and you instantly lose all your health, which is what's supposed to happen. After the very long but pretty important cutscene, and one of my favorites overall in the game, you finally get control of Adol once again. Exit back out of her house and head back into the forest area where we got struck by lightning earlier. Head back through the forest area and go into the area where the trees were. You'll notice that they're still gone, but just to the left of it you can exit out and go on to another screen. Just go there and then immediately exit that area. That's where actually the castle is, and we'll have to come here later in the game, but you want to make sure you at least visit there for now. Once you've done so, start heading over to the right area, watching out for the Venus flytrap enemies and the trees, and head north. Walk along this path and eventually you'll find the topaz. There are 3 magical jewels in the game, the topaz, the sapphire, and the ruby, all of which can be equipped as swords to make them stronger. For example, you're going to equip the topaz item in order to actually get a thunder sword. Now head inside the actual dungeon itself, and be careful of the fast moving bug enemies as you make your way up the first few flights of stairs. These bug enemies are rather quick, and they can end up getting you stuck against walls and do a lot of damage. Be sure to go up this set of stairs here so you can grab yourself the flame shield. After equipping the shield, head back down the stairs and then work your way over to the right, watching out for more bug enemies, and go through the next door. You may want to take out some of the bugs, but it's not really going to be worth the grinding because you'll have to exit and re-enter the areas most of the time in order to get the bugs to actually respawn. When you have the choice, go over to the right path and then follow that around and you'll find another chest. This time around you'll find the ice key number 1 inside. Once you make it back up, now go through the door area that we didn't go through last time, and continue along the path. Stop by the middle door once again, and you'll find the flame armor this time around. With the flame armor equipped, continue along the path, eventually making it into this room. Watch out for the bugs and work your way over to the left side of the screen. Watch out for the bugs and then go up this set of stairs in order to make it into this ice castle area. Up the stairs, you'll then be in a small room with 2 statues. Go to the right statue, the screen will flash a few times, and then you'll be able to enter a new door. Entering inside here, you'll now be in a whole new dungeon area. These fast-moving ice enemies are really a pain here, so you have to be really careful with your health. They can gang up on you, get you stuck in small little areas, and do a ton of damage. If for some reason you end up losing a lot of health, back out of the dungeon area back to here and you'll be able to stand still for a few seconds and replenish your health. Once you do that, of course, you can then go right back into the dungeon. These guys are also pretty relentless, and since they respawn rather quickly, they can definitely get in the way, and they're probably some of the toughest enemies we've seen so far in the game. You'll have a series of rooms you'll have to go through the staircases on, and there's usually 1 or 2 of the blue guys in those rooms, so be careful of them. Eventually you'll come to an actual treasure chest, this time containing the sapphire. Just like the topaz, you can equip it to a sword. This one will give you an ice element to your sword though. Once you're back to the first room of the dungeon, watch out for the enemies and work your way over to the right side, this time going down this set of stairs. Once again, you'll have a little bit of tight areas, but eventually you'll come to a room between 2 statues. Enter that one, you'll receive a chest that has 1,000 gold inside of it, which will definitely help. Then immediately go into the next door. This time you'll find the ice key number 2. After grabbing the chest from the previous 2 rooms, now head to the 3rd door at the far end. Head through a couple of rooms, eventually coming to a room with 2 more statues. Go to the statue on the right side once again, and you'll activate a couple of flashes, and a new door will open up. In this first room of the second half of the dungeon, be sure to go up the middle path because you'll find the Emberwind sword. Now it's time for the next boss battle of the game. Make sure you have as much health as you can. You may have to use an herb in case you absolutely need it, but the main thing here is be sure to have the equipment we got throughout this dungeon equipped. The room fills up with ice, and then a giant ice golem will form from all the pieces of ice. Run around the room at first and wait for him to actually start pounding into the ground with his fist. When he does this, he'll change colors, and this is your opportunity to actually run into him and do damage. With this new equipment and the proper level, you can actually get rid of him really quickly, and this ends up being a much easier boss fight than the first one. Once he's taken care of, we get our health back as well as some extra experience, and the door will open up. When you exit out of the boss room, head all the way to the right and grab the chest for a free 1,000 gold. Then, head down the staircases and enter into the next area. Once here, walk around the giant pyramid and then head up the staircases. Once inside the pyramid, walk around the big opening and head downstairs. After the cutscene is over, head outside of the temple area. Once outside here, head over to the right side. You'll see that this area is blocked off with rocks, but of course we got an item from the guy inside the temple, so we can use that in order to break open these rocks and enter another part of this dungeon. There's an even quicker moving blue guy inside of here, but thankfully they aren't as bad as the other guys, especially with our new equipment. Thankfully though, it's a quick area and we'll exit out very fast. We'll now eventually come to a new dirt-filled type cave. Inside here will be these weird green little bug enemies that are a lot slower moving than the enemies we were dealing with inside the other area. Outside here, head all the way over to the far right. You'll notice that the water is a weird purplish color, and we'll have to deal with that. Work your way over to the right and go onto the bridge. You'll notice here that the lake actually has the distinctive red color I mentioned. Go inside the first house here and talk to the person in the upper right corner. This is the person's wife that we met inside the temple. She mentions that her husband, well, is inside the temple. Head back down and you'll notice that the color of the water will actually change once again. Work your way back to the temple and talk to the old man once again. After the conversation with him, he'll give you the bomb item, and then you'll exit outside the temple and go through the left side this time around using the newly gotten bomb item. Inside here, just like the other area, you'll have a small set of rooms to deal with. You'll have a new enemy as well. These standing guys, though, while a little bit powerful, thankfully don't move really fast. Be sure to stop inside here and go to the chest in order to get yourself the Thunder Sword. The Thunder Sword can be equipped with the Topaz item in order to upgrade it, but for now we're just going to switch straight over to the Thunder Sword because it has better attack. Be sure to then exit out of the area and continue along the path. Go across a long bridge and then enter into the next door. Inside here you'll have some of those big green and blue enemies walking around. There's some tight areas, so be careful when fighting them here, and they give a decent amount of experience. Walk all the way over to the far right and enter through the staircase. Be sure to grab the chest here because it contains the Thunder Shield. Now you'll be inside of another forest-like area like we were earlier. Be sure to head through the ladders here and go to the bottom area so you can grab this chest that contains the Thunder Mail. You now have all 3 items of the Thunder equipment. Work your way all the way to the north and then start heading over to the right, watching out for the enemies and taking them out as you go. The second screen has more of the same. You have some more fast-moving bug enemies, but the green slow-moving guys here are pretty easy to deal with, especially with the equipment. They just have a decent amount of health, so you'll have to walk into them for a few seconds in order to drain that health. Be sure to check the upper right corner though for a treasure chest that contains 1,000 gold, then go along the bridge to the right side. Go across the long bridge with a bunch of enemies on it and enter the next town. Once inside the next town, head up the little path and talk to this guy on the carpet. He'll end up giving you the Salsetta flower. It'll cost 500 gold, but thankfully we just got a free 1,000, so that should not be an issue at all. Once you have the flower, head back to the main path and walk all the way over to the far right. Go down a little bit and enter inside of the sword shop. Once inside here, you should have enough money in order to buy the long sword. It may feel like we just got the Thunder Sword, but this sword ends up being better, so be sure to equip it. Now unfortunately we have to do some backtracking as we have to make our way back through the forest area, then back through that little bit of a dungeon in order to get back to the Earth Temple and talk to the old man and give him the flower we just got. If you need some experience during this time, be sure to fight the enemies along that bridge area near the beginning here, right next to the town, because it'll definitely help you build some experience. But for the most part, we'll be ignoring that, and we'll be doing some grinding in a little while. When you make it back here, talk to the old man and he'll instantly warp you to his town. After the scene, you now have the Eye of Earth, the next key item that we need in the game. With that now in our inventory, head back out of the town and down the bridge and go back inside the cave area to the far left. Once again, we'll have to do more backtracking here, as we have to make it from that village all the way back through the forest and make it back to the town where we bought the flower. Since we've done this a pretty good amount of times, you shouldn't have too much trouble being able to do the backtracking. Now, this is the time where I'm actually going to spend a little bit in grind. I'm going to gain 2 levels here before I actually enter the town. Once you gain the levels, head off the bridge and head back into the town itself. Talk to Dr. Flair right near the beginning for another cutscene. After talking to the Elder, we find out a lot more about the eye items that we've been collecting, and like I mentioned before, these are pretty much the most essential thing we'll be collecting throughout the game. After the scene, you'll get the cell set of medicine, as well as you'll see Dr. Flare get summoned back to Asteria, the very first area of East 1. Before we do anything else though, be sure to stop by the shop and buy your next set of armor, the breastplate. It's now time to head back to Asteria and save them from a demon menace. So head down south and go to the dock area and board the boat. You'll notice right away that the first town is being overrun completely by demons. Head up straight and then make a right at the first intersection and go inside the hospital. Talk to the man here and give him the cell set of medicine that Dr. Flare gave you. Once you've taken care of that, head up the path and exit out of the town. Stop on this bridge if you need to in order to completely replenish all your health. Here, thankfully, the enemies aren't too terrible and aren't much tougher than the ones we've been dealing with, especially with the couple of added levels that we just gained before coming out to this area. You'll notice some soldiers laying on the ground, but just ignore them. Instead, head up the path to this bridge. You'll get a small little bit of dialogue saying that you sense a demonic presence. Once you've done so though, head over and you'll notice that there's a weird spot on the ground. Go near this spot and you'll activate a boss fight. This can be a rather tough fight. The guy sends out 2 of these little purple masses that walk across the ground. They move rather slowly and can do some decent damage to you, as well as you have giant spears coming out of the left and right walls. Do your best to keep avoiding the spears and then wait for the opportunity to arise when he actually pulls back with his spear so you can actually do damage to him. Once he does so, keep doing damage and eventually he'll regain all his health for his second form. The second form ends up being easy and we need to take it out quickly. He'll fire out a ton of projectiles along with lightning, but you can just walk right underneath of him as he's attacking and do a lot of damage really fast. Drain all of his health and then you get your health back and go back out into the main field area. Once back out here, cross the bridge over to the right and go over farther to the right in order to enter Septic Village. Those familiar with East 1, you'll pretty much recognize this whole set of maps. Head up the right side and you'll find the Emporium in a small cabin, but you won't be able to open it, but just remember where that's located. Then head over to the left and enter into the opening to go to the Rance Village. Once here, talk to the man in the lower left corner. After the scene and learning about the transformation magic, head over to the lower right corner and enter inside this house. Exit out of the house for some more scene. Once you gain control of Adol again, exit out of the village and now go over to the Emporium. You'll actually be able to enter inside of it now. All the chests are open except for one. After all the scene, you'll now be back in the area of Salsetta. Once back on the dock, use our newly gotten wing item for the first time. This wing item is invaluable, as you'll be able to use it over and over again in order to teleport instantly to areas you've already been to. Use it and scroll through until you're able to find the Wind Village. After the scene with the guards, head up the long ladder that they went up. Once up here, enter inside this tree for a big fight against tons of the soldiers. This is technically a boss fight, but it really isn't too bad. Just try to do your best to keep your distance and take out the individual soldiers one at a time if possible. Just don't let them completely gang up on you so they can drain your health really fast. Walking around a big square will end up helping you a lot. When you drain their numbers though, then you can start attacking more precisely at individual ones. Use the wing item once again and now head to Stormvale Castle. This is why we stopped by here earlier in the game so we could instantly teleport here. And before continuing, we're gonna spend some time and gain some extra levels. After we gain 2 levels, replenish your health by heading outside of the castle area, Once inside though, head up the steps and go inside the actual castle itself. Now there is a little bit of a maze here, so we're going to be following the path I take in order to get to where we need to go here. Thankfully though, there isn't any enemies really to deal with, because as you can see, most of the enemies and characters are engaged with one another as you're making your way through. Eventually you'll come out actually in the throne room area where the big cutscene took place just a little while ago. Once in here though, head over to the right side first and head down this pair of stairs. Work your way all the way around to the corner and go up the next set of stairs. Like I said, there is a ton of rooms, but coming down here you'll be able to find yourself a Rhoda medicine. Once you make it back into the big throne room like area, now head over to the left side and take one of the left side doors downstairs. Once you go down here though, you will notice there are a few enemies around, so be careful of taking out these soldier enemies. One enemy you'll notice is just flames on the ground that you actually can damage, so just walk right through them though and try to get yourself to the door. Standing still of course on them will cause you to take a decent amount of damage. When you make it to this room, go all the way down for a cutscene. After the scene, you'll have to take out these flying soldier heads. Pretty much simple enemies, but they have a little bit of speed and you're in somewhat of a confined space. But with the leveling we've done, you should have no issue. Once you defeat them though, another wizard will end up appearing, so you'll have to take him out before you can actually continue on with the cutscene. Be careful and save if you need to, because we're about to face off with another big boss here. This is a pretty fun boss. He has two statue dogs with him that come to life when he whips. They then go rolling around the room in a little bit different pattern. After a few seconds of them moving back and forth though, he'll then summon them to himself and start running around with a giant flaming whip going back and forth. When he does this though, just go over the giant thing of spikes and then just walk back and forth right in him. You'll take some damage, but if you do so quickly enough, you'll be able to take him out before he goes back to actually using the dogs. After grabbing the Eye of the Moon from the cell that Lilia was actually located in, go down for another scene. After the scene, we pretty much finished up here, so now we need to just backtrack our way through to get back outside. Thankfully, the few enemies that were here when we were making our way through are now gone, as everyone has pretty much cleared out after Adol got knocked out. You seemingly can't use your teleport all the time, but when you make it up back to the throne room, you can then use your teleport, so go over the Highland. Once back at Highland, go into the upper left house here, and talk to the old man. During the cutscene, the game seems to mess up using the program I'm using, so once again, I'm gonna have to save up and go back in. Once you have control of Adol again, use your teleport in order to go to the town of Selrai. Once back here, we're gonna be talking to the old man since we now have the 3 sacred eyes. He takes us up a long mountain in order to meet the sage. After meeting with the sage, just go off screen from his house and then you can actually use your teleport again. Use the teleport and go to Lakeshore. Once back at Lakeshore, talk to the old man here who we saved his wife earlier on in the game. Once outside of his house, head south across the bridge and now head over to the right for the first time in the game. Underneath this waterfall, you'll see an entrance inside the mountain. Head inside. You'll be taken to a brand new area. Inside here, you're greeted with a whole bunch of new different enemy types. Thankfully, the first ones we deal with are pretty easy. Take out the enemies along the way to gain a little bit of experience, but for right now, we're just going to be mainly working our way through. Over here, you'll run into these big dragon-like enemies for the first time. They move pretty slowly, but they do take a few hits from your attacks. Be careful here with the quick-moving enemies. Walk across the bridge and head to the door on the opposite side. On the next screen, be careful of the big guys that are going to be moving back and forth along this bridge. Be careful here because you have a lot of quick-moving enemies on the small bridge area. These guys can gang up on you a little bit, and if you try to cross one of the small bridges at the wrong time, you may end up getting hit a bunch by one of these guys. Once you head south, though, you'll now be in another whole area. This time you're in the Fire Mountain area. These fast-moving fireball enemies are a huge pain because of how quick they move and how many numbers they have. Down here, be sure to go over to the right and go to the chest in order to grab yourself the ice shield. Just like all previous equipment, you want to make sure that you equip it now that you actually have it. As you can see, it actually is the next best shield, and it's one of the better shields in the entire game. Then head back up and then start working your way down the far right side of the screen. This will allow you to go around a looping path to get around where you need to go to the next screen. Once in here, you'll be in a fortress type area full of fire. You'll have fire jumping up from the ground that you'll have to avoid, as well as some pretty big enemies. But these enemies I find a little bit easier than the fast moving fireballs. In this room, be sure to hug the left wall and just move yourself down so you can get to the next chest that contains the ice plate. Once equipped, head back to the center area of this platform and work your way down, watching out for the jumping flames that come out of the ground. Watch out for the flames coming out of the ground just like we have been, and work your way down the left side. After another very small room, you'll now be inside of this temple area. Once inside the little shrine itself, just like before, head down the stairs. Of course, open the big chest in the middle here and you'll get the Sleet Wind Sword. We now have the complete set of ice armor, and I know I skipped a couple of the items here, but I really do find it easy in order to jump from the one set of equipment all the way up to the ice equipment. Once back outside the shrine, head back into the actual fire area itself. We'll now be going to another area here. Go down through the opening to the next screen. Once here, head straight down and open up the chest in order to find the ruby. Now, this is another one of the jewels that you can actually equip to certain weaponry to actually enhance it. Of course, the ruby has the fire element to it. Since we have the Sleet Wind Sword, you can actually use it now in this big opening gap. A few flashes of the screen, and it'll actually solidify, allowing us to actually cross. It's now time for another boss encounter. This one has us facing off with a ton of the big dragons, but with our new equipment, we should have no issue taking out all these big dragons. They move rather slowly, and you can even bunch them up a little bit in order to take them out easily. Once they're done though, just head off to the right, and then go up the small set of ladders here in order to get the hero sword. Even though we just got a new sword, we now get an even better sword as we upgrade now to the hero sword. Once you have that equipped though, head back to the left over the area where we fought the dragons and across the area where we raised the platform. Then start heading south. We're heading back to the temple area, but we're doing so we actually can teleport. Just like we did before, teleport to the town of Selray. Once here, head into the house where the Elder is, and then go all the way up the mountain to the Sage. After the conversation briefly with the Sage, if you want to, head past him and actually go through the door on the left side. Once over there, you'll notice that there's a cave in the mountain, so go inside there. After the scene, just like we did before, head off screen just one from the House of the Sage so you can actually use your teleport again. Now head over to the port city of Mania. Once here, we're trying to find out some information about the pedestal. Head to the far left house here and enter the second door. The gold pedestal that you need ends up costing you 3,000 gold, but you should have that. Unfortunately, I do make a pretty big mistake here as I go back to the town of Selrai and actually go back up the mountain to that small little cave west of the Sage's place. But unfortunately, that's not where we need to go actually. So, just watch it and we'll eventually teleport actually to the summit of the mountain that we need to travel to earlier on in the game. That we looked at the pedestal but we couldn't do anything there very early on. But now is the time you actually can go there. Once at the mountain summit, walk up and you'll put in the pedestal. After the coolest scene in the entire game, you'll have the ancient city now risen from the ground. Once you've done this, use your teleport to go back to Selrai again. Once back here, just go west of the city and exit out. Go across the bridge over to the far left side, and when you do so, you'll notice you'll be in a whole new area that we were never at before. The ancient city, of course, is filled to the brim with brand new enemies, and it's a very confusing overall map, and it's one of those ones where it took me quite a while to actually get it down to figure out where I needed to go. There's a ton of these different room areas, and a lot of them look pretty much the same, especially on the inside, so figuring out the exact ones you need to go to can sometimes be very tricky. Thankfully, making it to this big area, go north to the next screen. Follow all the broken columns all the way to the north, and then enter the small entrance to the far right here. Once you do so, be sure to go inside and flip the switch. This will end up draining the water, and it's now time for another boss fight. This is one of the first of the revenge fights as we deal with Gatus. This fight can do a decent amount of damage to you, but start off as soon as he starts spinning his axe, attack his feet a lot. Once it gets really fast going, back away from it and avoid it as he sends it flying out towards you. Then continue running back and forth at his feet. Once again, after a few seconds, run away so you can avoid the shurikens that he shoots out. If you just keep moving back and forth at his legs, it'll only take about 3 or 4 of his attacks before you're able to drain all his health and actually defeat him. Inside this now big open area, you can get really confused trying to find the next exit or entrance that you need to go to. Inside here, you'll notice the area is very dark and you have only a small circle of light around you. Be very careful when moving around here though, because there are enemies inside that can do a little bit of damage to you. Here, wait for this enemy to come all the way down the stairs and then attack it before trying to go up. However, most of the time you'll have to actually just rush the stairs really quickly and run into him a few times to bounce him away from you so you can actually get up those stairs. It's one of the most annoying enemies to me in the game. You also have to be careful of your health, but thankfully when you're outside of these areas that are dark, you'll actually be able to recover your health. You'll also be introduced inside here to the Mimic chest, so be careful of that as it'll look like you can actually grab it, but as soon as you get near it, of course, it'll come to life and start attacking you. I do recommend pretty much before you go inside any of the areas inside this place, that you do at least recover most of your health. Out here, run all the way across the bridge and enter inside the next door. Once inside, of course, it'll be more dark area with more enemies to deal with. After traveling for what seems like forever, we'll finally make it to another one of those shrine-like areas. After the cool cutscene, head down the stairs and now go to the left of the shrine and enter the door over there. Thankfully, these couple of rooms is really only the stationary enemies, but they still do have projectiles, so you have to be careful of them when making your way through. Then, once you're outside, once again walk across a very narrow path to the far left. Outside, you'll be now underneath the path we just took, and you'll be able to go down these stairs to the far right and actually get down the ground level. Once down here, go south and enter the bottom door. Once back outside, now go over to the right side and you'll be able to go up a small staircase. This will take you to the above area where you can walk across the platform to the left and actually go inside. Be very careful of the very fast moving gargoyle-like enemies here. Once outside, just keep heading south along the very small path, and eventually you'll come to multiple doors. Start off by going to the bottom left door. Go to the far right while inside here to go back out, and you'll be on another one of those walkway-like areas. This will allow you to walk around and go inside the pyramid to the far right. Before going to the next room, stay in here and actually fight these enemies for a couple of seconds and gain a level if you want to. Now head inside the room for a cutscene. Be sure to choose Give when you get the option. After the cutscene, head back down the stairs and go over to the right set of stairs and go through the entrance. If you choose Don't Give there, that ends up being a game over. Go inside the next room and go to Lilia's body. After interacting with it, head back outside and now go back to the door we were just in. Once inside the big chamber room where we had the cutscene, now go to the far left and go up the stairs and enter the door here. Exit outside the temple by going down this large staircase for another scene. After you have the scene, go back inside and go back through the throne room and go back to Lilia's body. You'll now be carrying Lilia's body as we have to make it back to the revival chamber. Head back to the room here and then go south to the actual room with the monsters where we trained a little bit earlier. The good thing is though, even though you're carrying Lilia's body, you actually can still fight the monsters here. Once back outside, use your teleport to go to the Silver Citadel B. When I land here, I'm going to stop for a second and recover all that health that I've lost throughout the whole area. Once your health has come back, then start heading south and go a little bit to the right and enter inside here. Thankfully, teleporting to the Citadel B, you'll be right near the revival chamber. You'll just have to walk through a few of these dark rooms. Just be careful of the very small hallways so you don't end up getting bunched up with an enemy and have them do a lot of damage to you quickly. As you can see, the enemies will drain your health really fast during this segment. Move across the platform, as you'll see it'll end up falling, and then go north to the actual revival chamber. With Lilia now revived, head back down south. Now head over to the left side this time, and you'll notice that the platform will actually form and you'll be able to go to the left door. Once inside here, be very careful, especially if your health is low, of the enemies during this little segment. Drawing them out of small corridors if you need to, so you can actually make it through. When you make it over here, you will end up falling, as the ground will end up falling apart. After the cutscene where Dogi saves the day, go back through the entrance that he actually formed and you'll be back inside the temple. Walk just to the next room and you'll be outside. This will give you the ability to once again regen all your health. Just to the left, though, will be another scene. After the scene, you'll now have the Iris Tower key, and you'll be teleported back over to the statue. Once here, head down south and go through the lower right door. Inside here, be very careful of this spike enemy, as they always seem to hit me a lot. Be sure to hit the chest down below in order to grab yourself the hero shield. With the shield now in your hands, head back outside. Regen your health if you need to from those spike enemies, and start heading north a little bit. Work your way over to the far left, regen all your health, and then go through the door. Inside here is another dungeon, and you'll see that it's actually a little bit different looking than the ones before. The lights here will go on and off as you're making your way through, but that really isn't too bad as you're still able to see all the enemies all the time. The enemies here, though, are pretty powerful, but they do give a good amount of experience, so just be careful. After traveling up the long tower, make sure that you go up here to grab the hero armor. We now have the complete set of hero equipment. With the hero equipment, we now have some really good armor and really good attack. This is the best opportunity to do some training. Stay in this room and gain 2 levels before moving on to the next room. Once you've gained 2 levels, head up the stairs to the far right, and go back outside the tower. Inside this room, head up north and talk to the guy in the upper left corner. After the scene with the demon/human, head back outside and go back down the tower to the previous room. Go past the room where we trained and head all the way back down to the bottom of the tower. Run through the last room here, being very careful, and then once you're outside, you'll use your teleport once again. Teleport to Silver Citadel B again. Once back here though, stand still for a few seconds and regain some of your health. Once you have your health back, head inside. Start working your way through, once again watching out for the enemies, but since you have better equipment now than we had before, they won't do as much damage to you, especially the ones in the very small corridors, but you still have to be a little bit careful. Make your way all the way back through this area and get back to the place where the revival chamber was. Instead of going to the chamber, head south to this switch. Once you've hit the switch, head back outside going the same way we came in. Once outside, once again use your teleport and go to Silver Citadel D. Make your way back to the tower and start working your way up the long staircases on the outside to get back up to the room where we met with that demon. Once back in the room, head through the first mirror. Then, head up the next staircase and go through the door at the top. You'll be once again outside the tower, working your way around. Be careful of the wizard enemies and their projectiles as you make your way up the stairs to the next door. Watch out for the two wizards here and then enter the mirror in the middle. In the next room, you'll have two mirrors once again. Enter the left one. Watch out for the flying eyeball enemies. Taking them out is pretty easy with the hero equipment, and thankfully they don't move too fast. You also have a weird enemy, this dragon statues that just stand still, so take them out as well. Go through the right mirror here and you'll be taken to a room with two chests and one slow-moving soldier enemy. This is going to be the best and last opportunity really to do a lot of training, so we're going to spend a large majority here doing the last bit of training that we need to so we can get ready for the end of the game. Don't do exactly what I do here. Instead, max your level. It will take a long time, but max your level all the way up. I end up not doing so, and I'm able to get past the next boss, but I can't defeat the next boss as the last area of the game has no enemies. So, grind all the way to the end, and then go into the boss battle against Bammy, which you will probably not have too much issue with. It's time to battle Bammy, and she is easily one of my favorite characters in the game. She starts off by having these four sparkles move around to the far corners. She then has flames spin around her, and you'll have to move quickly back and forth around the room to avoid the flames as they come flying towards you. When she moves in a circle and goes to the ground, she'll then cause lightning to spew out of the hole she ends up forming, so be careful and get away from that. When she stands on the ground and does the lightning charge into the walls, this is your opportunity to actually do damage to her. So do as much as you possibly can and then start avoiding the lightning as it bounces off the walls coming towards you, moving up or down in order to avoid as much of it as possible. After she usually does it twice, she'll then start repeating the pattern of her attacks. So once again, you'll have to avoid all the flames going around her, and avoid the lightning that she causes to come out of the hole in the ground. She can do a ton of damage to you, so be very careful of her moves overall. The lightning she sends spewing out of the walls from the left and right sides won't do a ton if they just clip you, but if you stand still and let them just run through you, they will destroy your health in just a second or two. Bammy is a pretty tough fight, but it's pretty rewarding for actually defeating her, and once she's done, we can continue on. After getting the Wing of Valor from the chest, head to the far right panel. Then go south and enter the middle mirror. Once you do so, head up here and be sure to hit the center chest in order to get Defensor, the next and best armor in the game. After grabbing the chest, continue over to the right and enter the next door. Be careful of the enemies in the next room because there is some small corridors for you to fight them in, so draw them out of those small corridors before going through. Watch out for the Mimic and then go down here in order to grab the Radiant Sword. As I equip both the Defensor and the Radiant Sword, you can see it's a huge boost to my attack and defense, as these are the best equipment in the game. Be careful while making your way back to the mirror that we entered earlier. Once back here, go to the right mirror this time around. Make your way through the very small room and you'll come out here. Once again watching out for a Mimic, but be sure to hit the chest in order to get the reflector. This is the last piece of the equipment we need, the shield. With the best equipment now in our hands, it's time to start continuing to work our way through this temple. Go back to the mirror, and then go back to the middle mirror that we had entered earlier on. Work your way all the way through, watching out for as many enemies as possible, and enter inside this mirror and then work your way up the small staircase. It does become a little bit of a maze here with the mirrors, so be careful when choosing the mirrors that you need to. When you exit out here, you have two mirrors to your right. Just ignore them and head south and enter the mirror below. When you come out here, watch out for one more Mimic and then enter the mirror on the far right. Once here, enter up the ladder inside the main tower. You'll come out this tree and there'll be a house at the very top. The wing item that we ended up picking up inside the temple will now come to use. Walk over to the right and you'll use it. This is where I ended up doing my big mistake here, as I didn't grind all the way to my max level and I really needed to in order to actually do damage to the final bosses of the game. So, unfortunately here I'm going to do another cut and I'll come back here right where I actually did all the rest of my training. You don't exactly have to have your final level maxed out, but you want to have every other level other than that one, or else you won't be able to tangle with the actual final boss of the game. As unfortunately, one of the biggest problems with Ys is that you have to be a certain level in order to actually do damage to the boss. It's now time to battle Garuda. With the maxed out level, we should have pretty much no problem with Garuda, as you can do a lot of damage to him. The only way you're really able to attack him though is when he's standing still in order to use one of his actual moves. The bouncing blue projectile is probably the worst since it bounces around the room a good amount, and it can gang up on you a little bit, but it shouldn't be too much trouble. Be sure not to be standing directly in front of him when he charges out his big blast, and then the other one you can really just run around in a circle and be able to avoid most of the fire projectile he shoots out. However, the battle's not over yet, as we actually have another form to deal with. This form of course is much tougher, but stay on the far right or left side of him so you can avoid all the lasers that he ends up shooting out. You'll have to time it correctly, but run in at the right moment to attack the purple ball inside of his stomach. You'll take a lot of damage from the lasers, but if you do it correctly, you'll be able to drain his health. That's another good instance of why you need to save before a boss fight, because that boss can really do a lot of damage to you quickly, and if you're not careful, you'll end up dying during it. Here I once again do one of the saves and loads just to fix the border of the screen. Now equip your hero sword. Now I ended up equipping both the armor and the shield, but I realized that you actually don't need to have both the armor and the shield. You can de-equip them and actually equip the best armor and shield when the boss fight is actually about to begin. After traveling through the large room, head through the middle path and you'll see a big opening. It's now time for the final boss fight of the game. At the beginning of the fight, be sure to equip the Necklace of Radiance, and then also, if you didn't already, make sure that you have the Reflector and the Defensor actually equipped, as you only need the hero's sword equipped to actually do damage to the final boss. Start off by heading behind him and watch out for the lightning that will start chasing you around the room. Of course, running in a big circle will actually help you a lot, as you'll be able to avoid the attack. He ends up repeating this a couple of times, so be very careful and just keep running and do your best to avoid it so we don't take any unnecessary damage. After avoiding the lightning attack for a couple of times, you'll then use the necklace on him. It's now time for the real final boss. He's going to fly around the room back and forth, and standing underneath of him running back and forth, you'll actually be able to do damage to him. He summons these little projectiles that end up dancing around and then flying at you. So wait for them to dance for a few seconds and then run away to the bottom part of the screen, and you should be able to avoid all of them as they come at you. Eventually he will land after you do a good amount of damage to him. It's now time for the next form. He starts off by doing a big lightning move all around his body which you cannot hurt. He'll then start teleporting around the room pretty quickly. Just be sure to stay away from him because when he lands he'll end up doing that big charge move again. After dodging this for forever, it feels like, eventually a cutscene will start. Now it's time for actually the final form of him. He starts off by doing this big charge move that ends up causing the entire amount of platform to start to shrink. You'll end up getting stuck in just one spot and you won't be able to move. Eventually though, the platform will rebuild itself for the most part. He then starts moving back and forth around the room, doing the same projectile he did earlier on, which is pretty easy to dodge again. Take the opportunities when you have them in order to directly attack him in the middle and keep moving back and forth to do as much damage as possible to him. After delivering the final hit to him, that is the final form, and now you can sit back and enjoy the ending to Ys 4 Mask of the Sun. as the credits now begin to roll as we get to see many of the cutscenes that we saw throughout the game. Ys 4 Mask of the Sun is easily not my favorite of the Ys series. It ends up lacking in some ways to me, and I definitely find the Turbografx CD version of Ys 4 Dawn of Ys to be the overall better experience for this game. However, with that being said, the game is still very enjoyable to play, and it's one I can always recommend. I don't think there's any game in the Ys series I really can't recommend that someone actually pick up and give a try to. And unfortunately, as a kid, I always wanted to play more Ys games. After completing Ys 3 for the Super Nintendo, I always wanted to see where the story was actually going on, and unfortunately, we never got a chance in North America back in the day to actually play this, or even the PC Engine CD version of Ys 4. I guess I can always be thankful that nowadays, since Ys has garnered a decent fan following in North America, at least one enough that small publishers have actually taken the games and brought them over to North America, doing a pretty good job of not only translating the game, but also providing some extras for the game as well that makes it an overall great experience to still pick up an Ys game. And even now, Ys 4 got a brand new remake for the PSP Vita, which I look forward to playing someday. I think one of my biggest issues with Mask of the Sun over some of the other Ys games is it's not overall a long game, but it's filled to the brim with a lot of dialogue and cutscenes. Some of which are fantastic, but some of the dialogue scenes seem to go on for a little bit too long. And because of that, it really kind of slows down the game from when you're actually in the action battle mode. Besides doing, of course, a lot of grinding like all Ys games, the dungeons, except for the last one, are relatively short, and I just find that the game design overall may not be as good or memorable as some of the other previous Ys games, or even some of the later Ys games. At the end of the credits, we do have one last final scene to wrap up the game. And from the end of Ys 4 Mask of the Sun, he actually goes on, and this is actually a prequel to Ys 3 Wanderers of Ys. But with that, that's going to wrap up this edition of Play It Through. I'd like to thank you for watching, and of course, I hope you enjoyed.